Invite Alan here.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hey, what's up?
TV started playing in front of my face. How you doing, Alan?
I am good. And to set the record straight, we have not met in person. Only online. Yes.
It's you hear. I mean, you look at. I mean, in our industry, I see the same. I see the same faces a lot of time, and so you don't really know whether you've met the people or not. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And
I think Alan is a little bit more professional at this than us. So.
Yes.
That's not true. Not true at all.
No, when I was looking at Alan, I said, "Oh yeah, Alan. Okay, of course. I've seen this a lot of time, and I've replayed your go-to. I've looked at your go-to talk from 23, and I said, okay, and it was super interesting, and I really enjoyed kind of prepping for this because I really like that talk.
Thank you. That was a fun one. I really enjoyed. That was a good conference. That's the first time I've ever been to Nashville, which I'm from Texas. I'm from the Dallas area, and I generally associate myself as a cowboy, and not American football, like actual
with the cow. With the cow.
Yes. And so when I went to Nashville, I was all ready to see the fake cowboys, the ones that from Texas. So it was a good time. I definitely saw a lot of them. I'm just going to come out just guns hot apparently and offend people right off the bat.
So do you go to a lot of conferences?
According to my wife, yes. I go to, I don't know, probably like 8 a year, something like that.
80?
8.
Eight. Yeah.
Okay.
He's
not Eric Johnson. That's a lot to some people. Yeah. No. I actually interviewed for Eric's team at one point in time, and he said it was like 25% travel at most. And I was like, no, it's not. I know you. I know who you are. No, it's not.
But I think he loves it. I mean, it's definitely his thing. So which conferences do you like? What's your favorite conference?
I mean, it's gonna be reInvent. That one is. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the platinum bar. Really, it's the scale of it, the amount of knowledge transfer that you get, the parties. The fact that you can see everybody that you talk to globally in the same place, like see them all in person, and you can just pretty much assume that anyone you talk to online is going to be there. It's like that upper echelon conference for me. It's like that's the one. If I had to only pick one, it would be that one, hands down every time. But yeah, I talk at other ones like Postman is another. It's another company that I really like a lot. So I generally try to go to that one every year and just talk about APIs in general over there. Yeah, hit or miss on the other one.
This year we'll have to go to reInvent. Last year we skipped it actually.
Yeah.
But
it was a good time. It always is. It's a rush. It's a rush.
The rush is crazy.
It's too intense.
The rush is intensive. You have to be...
Intense.
Oh my gosh. Every year at reInvent, it's usually on Wednesday that I start saying I'm ready to go home. It's just so much.
After walking like 3,000 miles and
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Staying out until 3 or 4 in the morning, getting up at 7, doing it all over again.
Yeah.
You learn so much.
Yeah. No, it is amazing. It's pretty amazing. But again, like as a contrast, like these like smaller conferences that like the one that the Config Management Camp one, it's such a different experience, and also really fun, right? Like I feel like it's a very different, non-commercial, small community, right? Like there's definitely like it's a different experience, but really enjoyed too.
Agreed. And what I like about the smaller conferences is that they're very niche. Like reInvent is about as wide of a net as it gets. You assume that if somebody goes there, that they're into software, and you can't really narrow it down for your assumptions at all. Software and AWS. But these other conferences are like super focused, like the talk that you were mentioning before that I did at Go to EDA Day. You know, everybody there was into event-driven architectures. Majority of them as well were into serverless. So it's like everybody there is like, I know exactly what we're going to talk about. I'm really excited about that.
Yep. Yep. I love the term architectureless over there. In that talk. Do you mind kind of talking a little bit about that?
Sure. So that talk specifically, I was talking about. Oh gosh, that one was.
I can help you.
Yeah, just give me the title or something.
You had WebSockets and gRPC.
Okay, real-time notifications.
Yeah, exactly, the real-time notification.
Yeah, so I prefer to use the term real-time notifications over something like WebSockets because people often use those two things interchangeably. And it's one of those things where you can describe, you know, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. You know, it's a subset. You know, WebSockets are a subset of real-time notifications. But a lot of people, you know, myself included, for years and years, thought that they were one and the same. I thought if I needed to get information from a server down to a client, I had two options. I had polling behavior, you know, where I just make constant requests every 10 seconds or 30 seconds from the client to the server, or I use WebSocket. And that was the word that I used every time, because that was what I thought. And, you know, I work at a company where we have a notification service, a managed notification service, and it does not use WebSockets. And so that kind of opened my eyes. It's like, oh, real-time notifications, there's so many different protocols, and there's so many different trade-offs that you can make based on your specific use case.
Right. I was surprised to see that in your talk, when you talk about the Momentum solution, it's a gRPC solution. Actually, didn't know that browsers knows how to basically can open a gRPC connection. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, there's a very light package that you can use given the whatever programming language called gRPC Web that enables those connections to be made.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah. So one of the things that I like about using the Memento clients is that the gRPC stuff, you just have no idea at all. That's what you're doing. It's abstracted away, which I know you guys are very familiar with, abstracting harder concepts away into meaningful API calls or semantically intuitive calls. You know, so for us, it's just, you know, topics, which is the name of the service, .subscribe, and that's like literally it, which is super cool. Or publish.
One thing that kind of strikes me that is interesting is that when I'm thinking about we have a WebSocket library, but it's not a PubSub library. I mean, we don't. I'm thinking about maybe we need to abstract the client also, right? I mean,
go ahead.
If I'm not sharing whether this is if I'm not sure whether this is WebSocket or using gRPC, why should I share this with my customer? Why is that? Why does that? I mean,
I think WebSocket as a building block is useful.
Yeah, of course,
it's not
an
useful. Abstraction.
It's not useful,
but I think there's value to defining an abstraction, right? And then maybe implementing it using WebSocket.
Yeah, exactly, or gRPC or whatever. This could be a provider, a provider decision in the win use case where you can change providers. I mean, you can do an API gateway with API gateway in Lambda, or you can do this with load balancers and Fargates. It's not the developer concern. It's the platform provider concern. Yeah, but that's interesting. Sorry for this distraction.
No,
that's note to self.
Yeah.
Note to self.
Yeah. It's but that's an interesting concept. Awesome.
So
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like how did you get here?
How did you become a programmer?
How did you become Helen?
Well, the funny thing is, I didn't start programming until I was in college. I remember I was sitting at a orientation at the school I ended up going to, sitting right next to my dad, and we were looking at the majors. And I was like, Dad, which one of these makes the most money? And I didn't want to do medical. He knew I wasn't any good at medicals. We were in the engineering department, and he's like, computer science. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. The school that I went to specifically had a software engineering major, which is not one that I saw anywhere else in Texas. I went and toured all the major schools in Texas, and no one has software engineering besides where I went, which was University of Texas at Dallas. So anyway, so I started that because I knew it was I assumed it was going to make a lot of money. I had written a couple of
such an American story.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it 100% that yes, it is. I had written programs without realizing that I had on like my TI-83 calculator when I was in school and in elementary and middle school. I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time. It wasn't until I was in college I realized that's what I was actually doing, which is funny. But I graduated college and I started at a company called Tyler Technologies, and I was there for 11 years, and I did almost every type of programming role or programming oriented role on an engineering side that you can do. Like I was a software developer, I was a tech lead, I did software engineering management for a couple of years, and then I did enterprise architecture for a couple of years as well. And during the time where I was a tech lead, going into being a manager, going into enterprise architecture, that was kind of where I started getting the cloud experience. When I was promoted from tech lead to engineering manager, they said, build a team, pick your team, and go figure out the cloud. Go figure out the cloud for us.
Interesting.
That was like literally my task. That was all that I was given.
Nice.
Go figure out the cloud.
When
So
was it? What year was it?
What year was it?
Yeah.
Like 2018.
2018. Figure out the cloud.
Yeah. So
you didn't know about the cloud before?
They chose me because I was the most vocal about the cloud in general.
Okay.
I had never really done any cloud development. Everything that I had done professionally was like enterprise desktop app development that's hosted on-prem. .NET, SQL Server Management Studio was always open on my machine. Single tenant stuff. So they wanted stuff that, could be SaaS. So go figure out cloud SaaS, figure out multi-tenancy, figure out NoSQL. I had an immersion with some guys from AWS because they were a AWS partner, and they really pushed serverless in that immersion. And that was something that I latched onto very, very quickly and said, yep, that's what we're doing. This is what we're going to be doing. So over the course of, I don't know, it's like 4 years, we just researched and built a couple of production apps, which was really fun. But while I was learning and all that, we had a really bad culture of doing everything word of mouth. I couldn't find anything written down. And I personally was going on basically an exploratory mission and figuring out all the stuff. So even if I wanted to ask somebody that I knew personally, I couldn't, because it was all on me to figure out. And looking online is really before this explosive content boom that we're living in right now. I couldn't find anything. So I started doing it. I started figuring out, what.
You started the boom.
I'm not going to claim that I started the boom, but I was, I was definitely early on in the boom. And I started writing and, published a lot of stuff on my personal blog. Actually, I started on Medium. And then, read some stuff where you don't really own your content on Medium. So it's like, okay, well, I'll write it on my own blog then. And then I started, learning and expanding out. It's like, what kind of capabilities can I add to my website that can manage things for me? Started building those things, learning, building, and then writing about them. And just continued kind of doing a self-documented journey while also documenting the stuff that I was learning about enterprise app development in this foray. And then that was when AWS named me an AWS hero, a serverless hero. And at that point, I got super excited about it. Started scaling it out more. Like I was continued to blog, but I also started a newsletter as well. I did that for about a year. It's still going, actually. And then I started a podcast on top of that to talk about people, like talk with you guys about people, talk about people like you guys about interesting things in the cloud, and continued to scale up everything. So once I really got things going, like I had done the newsletter for probably, I don't know, 6, 7 months. I had been blogging for like 3, 4 years. I started realizing it's like, I think I like creating content enough to do that as a job. And so it's like I took a serious leap of faith, honestly, leaving a job that I was at for 11 years. I was sitting in an architect role, and I was like, yep, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go and do content creation for a tech company full time. And that was when.
So you invented the role. You called it ecosystem engineer.
I mean, yeah, I will not claim that I made that role, but the CEO of Memento made that role. Yes.
Yeah.
It's essentially I just do developer advocacy here now. So I lean on the experience that I've built up over the past decade or so to come up with cool demos, build them, and then go around the world and talk about them, which is so much fun. So much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome story.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate the self-documenting journey idea. I feel like that's it requires a lot of discipline and a lot of like it's not easy to write. I feel like I'm struggling to like figure out how to get into writing more, and like I feel like I have too many opinions.
That could be a good thing. That could be a good thing.
Yeah, it's just I feel like again. So maybe I'll ping you later and give me some tips.
Yeah, I'm all over that. The first couple of times I started posting things that were more or less controversial or just not necessarily fits the mold of everything else that's out there. I would write the content, and then I would tell my wife before I published it, it's like, I'm gonna see my status in the community today. I'm gonna see if I'm gonna get hazed for what I'm about to say, or if I'm gonna get praised for forward thinking. And it's always fun. It makes me nervous every time I do it. But it's good to get different opinions out there, especially strong opinions.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you have any current kind of controversy you feel like you have right now in the state when you have controversy ideas, people consider them controversial at this moment in time?
Interesting.
There are several things that people generally associate me with that are more or less controversial. Like it is actually a good topic to bring up with you guys. Well, maybe not. I generally don't like the CDK.
Oh, nice.
Tell
us more.
Well, honestly, it's because I prefer when we're talking about infrastructure, I prefer to create it declaratively. I want to say I want this and this and this and this. I don't want to leave that up to code, because since I've been a programmer for 12, 13 years, I know programmers make mistakes. I do it all the time. And I don't want to accidentally make a mistake when I'm writing infrastructure code to spin up the wrong thing or whatever. Now, I'm saying all these things as things that could possibly go wrong. I know there's a lot of guardrails that the CDK has. I'm not super familiar with them because I just stay with SAM, the serverless application model from AWS, and just use that, which is essentially, shorthand CloudFormation.
Yep. But why do you think like developers don't make mistakes with declarative models?
They definitely do. In my opinion, though, it's easier to see. It's easier to see.
Why?
I just feel like it's all matter of fact there. It's like, to me, it's like looking at a receipt. Here's everything line by line that's there, that's present. And I can look at it and I can see, okay, yeah, this is exactly right or exactly not right. If, looking at it another way, where it's code driven, it's not necessarily like that, because I could have something in a loop. I could have something abstracted away in a high level construct. It's not right there on the surface for me.
Interesting. I've talked with a lot of DevOps engineer, and I talked to them about the differences between the two, and it's interesting because I think when I think about DevOps people, I mean DevOps engineers, and those of them who kind of favors the kind of declarative approach, I think that sums up their thinking pretty good. I think that's an interesting point of view. What do you think about this, Elad? What's
About what?
I mean, I'm asking Elad what he thinks about this.
I'm not hearing it. What? Think about what?
I'm asking Elad what he thinks about the declarative. Sorry.
If I wrote a piece of code that was basically, like new lambda, new queue, new topic, new, right? Like it was like basically every line was like new lambda and there's a bunch of properties, new topic and a bunch of properties, new queue and a bunch of properties. And that's it.
Yeah, but okay.
Right.
But
technically that was equivalent, right? Like from
But if you have for loops.
Wait, before the phone.
Yeah.
I'm trying to build the argument.
Yeah, but,
if I just wrote some code that has like a list of resources, right? And then for each resource, all the properties of the resource,
yeah,
flat, single, no structure, right? Like basically just a list. Then it would technically be equivalent to a declarative model, right?
It's another layer of abstraction.
No, it's basically a different syntax.
No,
it's the same exact content.
But do you have abstraction?
No,
okay.
No abstractions.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you so far. I'm with you, and I agree. Yes.
Okay, agreed. Right. And so I think what I'm trying to say is that the programming language based imperative model is a superset, right, of a declarative. You can use it declaratively if you feel that for your engineering culture, team, whatever, right, like requirements, then you want to use the model declaratively. Then you can technically write code that is declarative in nature, right? Like I feel like this point about, you know what I'm trying to say? So it's not that I don't think that you're talking about the abstraction, because if you're using SAM, you're using abstractions, right? Like you're using.
Yep.
So it's not about the abstraction, it's about like the syntax of how you define the abstraction. Define the declarative. I see Mark is. No, I'm curious to hear.
I'm sorry, I missed the question. If you asked me a question.
Yeah.
No. You did you ask a question?
No, I mean my question was that my point was that I think that when a declarative model is a subset of an imperative model, and I think the power of using an imperative primitives to describe something, right? Like when you're doing for I equals 0, 1 to 0, 1, 0 to 10, new bucket, then you're describing 10 buckets. The fact that you've used this for loop doesn't make it less like harder to understand if you're doing the right thing, right? Like if you're seeing the code, and I think the contrary, right? Like it actually expresses your intent more precisely, right? Like that's where CDK comes from. It's to be able to express the intent of the desired state. If you want to, you don't have to. You can completely express like just the details. You can do new bucket 1, new bucket 2, new bucket 3, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So that's how I see it, right? Like I feel like it's just a superior model. The fact that you can abuse it. You can also abuse JSON files and YAML files, and we've all done that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easier to abuse something as powerful as a language.
Maybe
it's easier to abuse. I mean, I have abused Java and the abstract system in ways that come on, it's you can abuse it.
But it's an age-old conversation.
No,
yeah,
Some people like this. Some people, this is more suitable for them. Some organization, this is more suitable for them. This is what it is.
Yeah. It's that we talked about adding support for defining wing applications in YAML, right, or in JSON,
right.
And so basically, what it does is it's kind of like have you seen DCDK? Are you familiar with DCDK?
No.
I'll share the link in a second, but it's basically a project that we did at AWS to allow you to define CDK applications using CloudFormation-like templates.
Oh.
So you can basically use all of the CDK constructs, any CDK construct, and it'll look like a CloudFormation template. So you basically just write like the name of the type, and then properties, and it'll be exactly the CloudFormation syntax. So it's a way to implement SAM using CDK, right? Like you can literally implement like the SAM primitives, and then DCDK would read the file, and it produce CloudFormation on the other side, and you can deploy it.
Interesting.
And so we were thinking of doing something like that for Wing too, which would also be cool. The same concept.
I have to throw a caveat in here though, and this is probably going to progress the conversation quite a bit. I feel like I have more or less a sysadmin opinion on the declarative versus imperative thing. So it's like, I know this is the old way of doing it, and I like it because I know it, and I'm not proud to say that in the least bit. And one of the things that I read in Postman's book, where it's talking about an API first world, there's this one full pager that it has on progressions in the API industry. And it was talking about binary code, and then it was talking about how we progressed past binary by creating programming languages. And then we progressed past programming languages by, I don't know, something else. And you just have all these progressions with higher and higher order abstractions until you get to the point where we're at now, where most things are an API. And that's very far abstracted away from ones and zeros, which is what we used to be at. And I know that this declarative approach to really just, I'm not even going to say infrastructure, I'm just going to say building modern applications in the cloud is old. It's like at this bottom of this abstraction tier. And I don't think we're really going to move on really as an industry or a community until we meaningfully get past that and we have enough people that aren't doing it anymore. So with that, let me backtrack a little bit to what you said. I don't know if you should do that in Wing. I don't know if you should try to support that and meet people where they are, if you should just keep trying to push the mold and say this is the way that we need to do it because it's better, or it's the new abstracted way that does things a little bit differently, that pushes you forward faster.
Yeah, I feel like it's completely legitimate to have different interfaces, different ways to define something, right? Like I feel like it's completely legitimate that in order to be more that there are different types of like. Anyway, I think it's not mutually exclusive. That's what I'm trying to say. I feel like it's completely legitimate that let's say I'll give you an example for the use case for this, right? We were thinking about what would it take to take any containerized, repository, repository with a Docker file, and deploy it using Wing. Now, technically, the Wing main file in this case would just be something like new container and then a path to your Docker file and the ports that you're exposing and whether it's public access, right? Like so basically just a bunch of properties. And so in this case, if I had something like this declarative syntax, then I could give you the ability to write wing.json at the top of your repository and say container, and then basically instantiate an object, right? Instantiate an object. And that's all I would need, right? Like I don't need to use all the power of Wing to express my entire cloud application. No, this is a fucking container. Just give me the container. Same for like a static website, right? Like I want to deploy a static website with Wing. It's basically new cloud website with the path to the website.
Yeah, to the client.
And when you deploy it, it deploys in the CDN, and it's working locally. You get like the whole feature, but CDK, wing.json with a simple website configuration. So this is the use case, right? Like it's not about, this is basically about allowing people to use Wing in a different way, or interact with the abstractions in a different interface,
That makes sense. It's a good use case. I like that, because I actually had this conversation with somebody recently where, as much as we'd like to think that everybody is starting new projects from scratch, that is not the case. Everybody's coming come into software development with software that they have to maintain. Like I didn't write anything new until I was 8 years into my career in software. Like it was just maintaining applications for a long time. I was over several of them, but it was not new. And that's the kind of thing that you have to think about a lot, because I think the majority of us pragmatically are there. And if we want to do something new, we're likely bringing our baggage with us too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely on our mind.
Yeah, definitely.
So how's Memento going? Like, tell us a little bit about what's exciting
Yeah.
there.
Honestly, I'm just super excited about the topics service, which is that notification service. And I'm excited about it because I haven't seen anything else really quite like it. Where for a long time I would tell people that are into front end development, have you used Pusher? And a lot of people have. It's a company that does notifications as a service. It's a managed WebSocket service, really.
Yeah.
And it can easily connect browsers together, browser sessions together. And I always thought that was super cool. It's what I always used when I was building out proof of concepts throughout my career, whether it was for work or a side project, to give any sort of interactivity bit. It was, basically an easy WebSocket for me. And so what I like about what Momento's done with their approach, or our approach, is you can connect anything from anywhere to each other. So you can just do browser sessions together without building a backend at all. Can't even tell you how many chat apps I've made in an hour. An hour or less, where I'm only building one page. I'm only writing one React page, and that's publishing and subscribing to the same topic, aka channel, if you're familiar with the vernacular, and that's it. Yeah. And it's taking the content from the message and shoving it into a list, and that list is what displays on screen as chat. And you can also do that and subscribe to the same topic in a server-side component as well, as long as it's stateful. Say you have a container up in the sky and you wanted to maybe put the conversation in long-term storage, or you could potentially do, one of the cool demos that we have is a live translation and moderation chat, where it actually uses a webhook. So whenever you send a message across with topics, it can publish to a webhook. That webhook triggers a Lambda function. Lambda function runs it through a moderation NPM package, and then passes it to Amazon Translate, and then it pushes the translated message down back a different topic to a client. So you have one Lambda function, and it does all those things, and it's super easy. It's super fast. It's secure. It has role-based access control, and you can
into the push notification, into the notification service.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nice. This is powerful.
Yeah.
This is powerful. Nice.
Yes. And probably one of my favorite things, I actually just wrote about this, I published a blog post on it last week, is being able to access basically server-side shared resources from anywhere. So, I just made a little game as a showcase. If you guys played a game called Flappy Bird like 10 years ago, super frustrating game. For the people that don't know, it only has one button. It's like spacebar, and you control a bird, and you just try to get that bird to navigate through pipes that are scrolling on the screen. If you hit a pipe, you're dead and you lose. So I just made a version of that built on Memento that's multiplayer. So you can see everybody that plays at the same time, and just crash into the pipes, and it's super, super frustrating. But one of the cool things that I did, it's a really fun pattern that I've done just on Memento services, is that player list. So if somebody joins, I want to see that, let's say all three of us are playing. Whenever you join, it hits an API and goes to the server side, creates an auth token scoped pretty narrowly, and sends it back down. But what it also does is it puts your name in the cache, inside of a set in the cache on the server side.
Okay.
Just to say, this is the player list. This is the active player list based on the auth tokens that I've issued.
Yeah.
And then when the game starts, from the browser, I can access that same cache item as read-only with my auth token, pull that list from the browser. I don't have to create another API endpoint that goes out and gets it, and use that data to basically generate all the players that are going to render on screen. It's super nice to have access to these shared resources on the client and on the server.
Yeah, we need to implement
our brains are.
No, I think it's going to be the easiest. What the easiest thing is just create, bring, kind of use their basically not abstract.
Just bring. I think I actually
bring Memento.
I think I actually started working on like a Memento
notification
for Wing.
I have to admit. Sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
I have to admit I've done a Vite WebSocket React guide in Wing. I did the workshop. It was great doing this. In 1 hour, you have WebSocket set up, an API gateway, some counter, and that's it. But when I've created the broadcaster class in Wing, I gave it an API of a WebSocket. The API was a public WebSocket, and I said, well, I mean, this is awkward. I mean, what if this is a broadcaster? Maybe servers would like to register. So it bothered me. That's why I've asked. It bothered me that I'm doing this, and that's why I think we should bring
Memento.
Memento pops up, because for me Memento is also kind of the index, and because I'm exposing a lot of I'm exposed to a lot of AI stuff. For me, it's the index vector. I mean, that's how I think about Memento. I was surprised to see the pops up stuff.
Yeah. So you have used the vector index that Memento has as well?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit in some LLM stuff that I've done.
Nice.
I think the other thought that comes into mind is one of the things that we are exploring is being able to actually interact from the browser with your Wing resources. So basically, think about the browser as like an in-flight.
Yeah, but you have to put
in-flight scope, and then you can do bucket.put, whatever, counter.increment, to get access to database. And so this connection between the browser and the backend, like technically it's possible. Like Wing can totally do this, but the implementation of the communication channel is annoying, is heavy lifting. We need to set up an endpoint and like exactly the things that Memento might be able to solve. And so we can tunnel those requests through Memento all the way to the backend.
gRPC and
basically get like cloud access from your browser to your cloud resources through an authenticated right? Like that sounds like it's exactly what's
super cool.
Yeah, and there are going to be some people that hear that and think that's a terrible idea. Access
I know
directly, because in a lot of cases, if you're doing that, especially if it's not read-only operations, you're potentially bypassing business logic by moving things into the client side, or you're having to re-implement client side or re-implement business logic in the client side, which you obviously don't want to do that. So it definitely has use cases, but it is not for everything as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah, you're saying that which I agree that the separation of the client and the server is useful, right? Like it's an important.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I go back and forth on between. It's like, what do I believe anymore? What do I think?
Yeah.
Is that something that should the lines be blurred? Like when React, really serve components, and it's hard to tell to the untrained eye, what is running on the server side, what's running on the client side. And, it makes me think, it's like, well, somebody clearly thought this was a good idea. And it's like, why do I not think that's a good idea?
Yeah.
Is that one of the things that I need to let go in order for us to move on, in software?
Totally. But sometimes we have some preconceived and some kind of habits, architectural habits. I'll give you an example like that we are seeing in Wing. Is Wing has this concept of in-flight API for resources, right, for objects, right? When you define a class in Wing, you can define a bunch of methods that are pre-flight and methods that are in-flight. And the in-flight API is technically the contract to this, to this entity in your application. And this entity can be like a huge thing, right? Like it could include like hundreds of resources or whatever, right? Like it's a bunch of cloud resources that are interacting together. And so, but for all intents and purposes, this is your interface to those resources, and the code that runs inside those in-flight methods is can interact with the various resources inside this entity. Now, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot is that, well, today when we're designing cloud systems, the classic boundary between microservices is an API, right? Like as an HTTP API.
Yep.
But technically, if you have an object in your hand and you have a bunch of methods that are in-flight methods, this is your contract. You can interact with that object without having to cross another layer of business logic, right? Like you basically bring the business logic to the consumer.
Yeah.
And I, of course, understand that there are problems with this. I'm not saying
there are tooling problems with this. Do you acknowledge that there are tooling problems with this? If I have a memory leak, I have a memory leak, not the other microservices.
Yeah.
That's and if I have a latency problem, I have a latency, not the other. So there's a tooling problem as well.
No, I mean, it's exactly the same topic that we discussed earlier. So, but I'm saying, I think like the fact that we can make this decision,
right?
Of like, what are we putting here, and where is the boundary? But the boundary doesn't necessarily have to be like a physical boundary.
Right.
It could be like a logical boundary, and that's, I think, being able to actually control this is adding more options to the minimum. Right?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's maybe.
It's real interesting because I've seen some sneaky things done this way. Like almost sounds like another way of what you're saying is basically these resource objects you're talking about are like SDKs. They have all the logic built in, and they handle them not really necessarily in the client side code, but in the object code.
In the caller.
Yeah, in the caller, exactly.
Yeah.
And I've seen really tricky things. Like I built a large scale production system that did evidence management one time. And the majority of that is file manipulation and file management. And I was doing an assessment of a file management service that wasn't in AWS. It was a third party. And I was just shocked at what they were able to do and how fast they were able to do whatever operation it was. I don't remember exactly what it was. So I was talking to the engineers and I was like, how are you doing this? Like, this doesn't make sense to me how you would do X, Y, or Z. Let's just say it's some sort of transform on a file. And they're like, well, we do it on the client before we send it to the server. And I'm like, that's tricky. That doesn't work everywhere. For sure, that doesn't work everywhere. But that's a really interesting approach to essentially, borrow some compute of your callers, be it in a browser or something. And I think with the way that hardware is scaling these days, that's becoming more and more of a thing that should be done. Why would I use my server-side compute when your browser is more than capable and I can do that securely?
It's interesting.
I think that we can sum up that the areas when the lines are blurry are interesting. This is where innovation usually comes.
Right.
There's something that we've figured, that the community figured out, but we haven't figured it out. We haven't kind of codified it yet. And these are the areas that are interesting. And I want to say this was super interesting talk, and it can go on for hours, but it can go on for hours. We have Mark on the other side, and I want to thank you very much.
Wait, before you say goodbye. Yeah. Would you be interested in like coming over again and we can like hack together this Memento library for Wing?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yes, let's do that.
Let's do that. That's awesome.
Okay, so we'll set that up.
Great.
Awesome.
Great. So, Alan, thank you very much for this conversation this time. This is, I don't know if you're a regular Wingly watcher, but we have a song.
Regular Wingly. We have a song.
We have a song, basically, every time. Usually we have Mark the DJs choosing the song. This time we're getting an oldie from Amiel. So we're going to hear the Bronski, Small Town Boy by the Bronski Bit. And then we're going to have the changelog. Alan, thank you very much for showing up. And we'll see you in the session, in the walk, and basically kind of creating that resource session.
All right. Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Thank you, guys. It was a great time.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.